are strictly those of the host, guests, and callers, and not necessarily those of this station, its staff, management, or sponsors. It's Monday night at 9 p.m. and time for Sex Talk with the Siegel Brothers. Dr. Ricky Siegel is a certified sex therapist, educator, and supervisor, and his brother Larry Siegel is a clinical sexologist and certified sexuality educator. The Siegel Brothers are here to answer all your questions about sex and sexuality, but we're unsure who to ask, including questions you didn't even know you had. They will also welcome guests from around the globe to talk about a wide variety of topics and issues within the fascinating world of sexuality. Thank you for joining us, and welcome to Sex Talk.
Good evening, and welcome to Sex Talk with the Siegel Brothers. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Dr. Richard Siegel. I'm a certified sex therapist.
And I'm Larry Siegel, a clinical sexologist and certified sexuality educator.
And my super awesome big brother.
That's still my favorite role.
We are here on the radio in South Florida on 95.3 FM and 1470 AM. You can call in to the station at 888-565-1470. We're also live streaming on Facebook. If you're watching us there. Hello.
Hey,
thanks for joining us. Please feel free to hit that like and share button liberally. And we're also on Instagram Live with our guests feed. So hello to all our Instagram listeners and followers. Please feel free to join the conversation. You can go to the Facebook page for Sex Talk with the Siegel Brothers and shoot us a message, a text, or hit that send email button.
Yes.
So we're here every Monday night from 9 to 9:30 on the East Coast in South Florida, in the perennial tropics, to talk about sex, because it's critically important and it isn't talked about often enough in ways that aren't stupid and salacious and exploitive and giggly and adolescent. And
that's kind of the caveat.
Right. So we try and bring a serious and health and medical and psychological approach, but we are also extraordinarily lucky that we have this wonderful platform that pretty much fell in our lap just about 2 years ago this month.
That's right.
And
That's right.
we
We're going
get
on 2 years.
Well, it's also fortunate. We complain an awful lot that the larger sexological fields are all too small, and there's way too few compared to larger fields like medicine and mental health. Millions and millions of practitioners, far too few tread near the dreaded sexuality. But the good part of being part of such a relatively small field is we get to be in contact with some giants and incredibly wonderful people, and get to have guests on from all over the country, all over the world, and all over our local neighborhood. And we are so fortunate again tonight to have a return guest, our dear friend Michelle Alva.
Yes.
So welcome back.
Welcome back. So glad.
Thank you for having me back.
So glad
So
you're
much
back.
fun.
Joining us. You were just so awesome the first time. We're really glad to have you back again.
Thank you.
And
I'm so happy to be here.
yes, we had a
Thank you for
fascinating.
the work you're doing.
Thank you too.
Oh, it's a pleasure.
We had a fascinating talk. I want to jump right in because we had such a fascinating talk over dinner, and the timing, like everything, serendipity, right?
Yes.
There's just there's been such a collusion of events in our fields, in medicine, in mental health, and in this sort of overlapping allied health arenas, like we talked about last time, your work as a pelvic floor physical therapist, and we could not be bigger fans, like to quote our dear friend and another member of our faculty at Modern Sex Therapy Institutes and guest on the show, Marilyn Volker, talks about the dream
and
team.
Carl Gables.
Right? The dream team, getting all the right people in place to holistically and comprehensively help people through sexual problems, dysfunctions, trauma, sexual histories. And, of course, the physical therapists are one of the relatively newer stars on the dream team. But you've taken that a whole step further, right? Now, last week we had another dear friend of ours guest on the show, Marilyn Castellanos, who is a physician who, through sex therapy and psychiatry, found her way to functional medicine. We had this great talk about how she is to medicine what kind of systemic approaches are to psychotherapy. Like, forget about symptoms and diagnoses and who's the identified patient. Let's look at things holistically. The couple's the patient. The family is the system. So now this week, we just dovetail so perfectly into bringing your world into this, which kind of integrates not just the physical therapy, but elements of Tantra and healing. And what's become so clear in the sex therapy world of late is the connection to people's sexual problems, particularly blocks, and of course, histories of trauma.
Yeah.
And also to add their mindset, which is what caused me to study hypnotherapy recently, and neurolinguistic programming is looking at how our mindset about our sexuality, our mindset about our genitals, how we were brought up to believe about our sexuality and our genitals just by the way that we were raised is such an important aspect to look at. And also our emotions, and how am I feeling emotionally about my genitals and my sexual history, and how we walk around carrying baggage about that for years and years and years. So my background as a physical therapist never taught me to look at that. And learning yoga from the age of 17, I knew about energy and prana and these concepts of looking at the body as an energetic system, the chakra system. So it behooved me to learn more about energy and the system of energy, and then come to find out that your orgasmic energy, the ecstatic, expansive energy of creation, has a lot to do with your health and amplifying that flow
and mood and
releasing back pain and jaw
right?
tension, and therefore I cannot ignore
So awesome.
looking at those aspects. And I've been exploring and praying. Please, God, help me, because why isn't this normal practice? Why isn't this what everyone is doing?
This is why sex talk came into being.
Why
right?
can't we work with people wholly?
Yeah.
Holy, WHOLLY. And then I'm living in this world where I guess I don't watch a lot of television at all, so I don't get to feel the judgment about sexuality the way that other people may watch me and what the work that I do. And there's so much judgment that we all project when we see a person, even the word tantra for some people.
Oh, absolutely. Right. There's a connotation to it for a lot of people.
And even going back to like hippies in the 60s, the reputation was that the Kama Sutra was some kind of ancient sex manual. And people even then missed the point.
Right.
It's about the sacred, it's about the spiritual, it's about the union of two souls in communion, to use that old cliche, rises us up to a level.
And we all came from there. We all came from down there.
Exactly.
So
And how right?
it has to be somewhat powerful,
can we
right?
Can we
and
say
important.
down there and genitals on the radio? I think we have to say cha-chas and hoo-hoo dillies.
Yeah.
Right? But it's spot on. We're so uncomfortable that in itself, and we can get into the topic of trauma, but even before we get there, we're all kind of, I guess it's trendy these days for a lot of therapists to talk about little t and big T trauma. There's a baseline little t trauma that comes from the very idea of acknowledging that we're sexual beings and all of the messages that immediately come along with that about how wrong and awkward and ashamed and embarrassed we're supposed to be about that. So in a sense, almost everyone,
Has been
except
affected,
maybe
except for me.
hippies, kids out in communes, right? In California, grew up in an environment where there's some kind of trauma connected to sexuality.
Yes.
So now sex therapists have couples in their offices talking about why they can't let go and, surrender to sexual passion and ecstasy and orgasm. Women who cannot orgasm at all for no other reason than they cannot let go.
And feel safe.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Feeling safe is so
How many
important.
times do people are often shocked? We remember we were talking with somebody in New York, our cousin, in fact, was talking about a case. And this happens with a lot of women as well, that when I have a woman who's describing to me her inability to have an orgasm, and it really is one of these primary issues about letting go, I'll often sort of throw in, do you have trouble falling asleep?
Yes.
And almost always you'll find those two go together for exactly the same reason.
Isn't it
And when they have an
fascinating?
orgasm, they have the best sleep ever.
Well,
But
when they
isn't
let
it,
them.
Isn't it fascinating that
Yeah.
the verb we choose to associate with sleep is fall? Because that in itself is a scary thing. That's one of those natural
Interesting,
instincts, right?
yeah.
We're programmed to
Surrender
tighten up
to
and fear
sleep.
falling. But to fall is, you can't force yourself to sleep. You can't get in a bed and go, right? You'll be up all night. So without the ability to let go, that's a
Right.
real strong connection.
Now, given that,
Surrender.
why then do people refer to sex as sleeping?
Sleeping together.
Right.
Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Right? Are you two sleeping together? Are you kidding? We're up all night having sex. Nobody got any
Some
sleep.
people say that should be the response.
Well,
Right.
it's just as ridiculous as looking at porn.
Right.
Like looking is the
Right.
only activity going on. We're just too uncomfortable talking about these things.
Exactly.
And if self-love is not part of this discussion, how can we talk about partnered love? Or,
Well,
you know?
sure. And any other kind of love. Again, I think one of the greatest ironies is that there's such a great, and of course this is sort of this puritanical thing, and there's a real definite, I think, root to this. But the irony that sexuality, ecstasy, pleasure used to be the vehicle to the divine. And then all of a sudden, somebody decided, no, they got that big black magic marker, redacted all of that stuff.
Wasn't it Augustine?
And now it became, it really was Augustine who
Or
kind of
the
created sex
Roman?
negativity.
Who was the Roman, one of those emperor popes?
Well, I mean, you're also talking about Constantine, who was the first Christian emperor who kind of wrote the Old Testament because he didn't like the portrayal or depiction of God and that stuff. So,
And sex.
And that it kind of changed all of that. So, but a lot of people, especially religious people, don't seem to kind of get this idea that sex really always was about the sacred.
Well,
It
all
really
of your
was the
body,
connection
that's
to
the
the
part that I don't
divine.
understand is all of your body is sacred. All of your body. There's a reason why we have creation happening down there. And yet so many of us are shut down. So this is a part of my mission in my life is to bring back the sacred, the science, embrace all of who we are. And I mean, I see miracles happen when people discover more fullness and richness in their human beingness because of reconnection
Right.
to their body.
And I think that's such an important piece to that idea. And again, talking about this sense of letting go and how people deal with a lot of these things, how people really kind of hold back their ecstasy, how people deprive themselves of such orgasmic just pleasure. Even people that have orgasms, how much more can they be if people would sort of let go?
Yeah. Well, that's the sacred surrender exercise that we do in this practice for couples and people that want to feel the surrendering.
Maybe
That's a really
take a
nice
step back
exercise.
and ask you to just tell us again. I know we talked about it first time you were on the show, but just for our new listeners or people who didn't hear you, tell us what the Alva method is about and how it came to you.
Sure. Well, the Alva, I call it now the Alva love approach. I like those words. They're more expansive. Basically, I am trained at FIU 23 years ago as a physical therapist, and I've studied pelvic floor physical therapy, and I'm also a yoga teacher. I have a lot of different backgrounds and trainings because I felt that from my own past experience of having chronic pain in my pelvis for 14 years of my life, I had held trauma, shame, and guilt in my pelvis, in my body for a lot of years. And I released that in the bathtub. And when I was 28 years old, I had these memories leave me of the past. And I judged myself a lot because I didn't say no my first sexual experience. And I shamed myself and I thought I was damaged goods because I was no longer a virgin when I was 14. So I had something happen that I perceived as very traumatic because of my upbringing and the judgment of what I allowed to happen. So I got to experience pain in my body because of a perception that I had made 14 years earlier. And when I went to physical therapy school, I already was practicing yoga. So I got to see the lack of emotional pain talking. We didn't talk about emotional pain. Chronic pain, I have come to understand now very much so, is related to emotions and emotional pain and holding emotions like resentment, shame, guilt, blame, unforgiveness to ourselves. And then there's a way of actually processing the charge of those emotions in your body tissues. And I have experienced this myself. So people come in with 8 out of 10 pain. And just from doing the neuro-linguistic programming, the breathing, connecting, which is a part of this approach, is about giving the power back to the individual and teaching them the science of their own healing power. And so the person is very empowered. They are doing a lot themselves from the questions, the guidance that I give. And this is done over the phone. It can be done in person also. I don't even have to touch people to do this because you're so powerful. And really, it's been about my inquiring, how can we guide people in a way that is most empowering for them, least work for me, and using just my voice, guiding with questions, we can actually reprogram the subconscious. And so hypnotherapy, NLP, breathing in a certain way to stretch the fascia.
That's beautiful.
It's a combination. It's integrative. And this is something where we're integrating the way that we're working with the individual, which right now you're all sitting, maybe some of you are eating and you're thinking and you're having emotions. So we are that. Why aren't we working with people that way? A lot of times one is missing. So for example, with hypnotherapy, the hypnotherapist is guiding with their voice. The body is not necessarily in any certain position. With this Alva Love approach, the body is being elongated, stretched, and opened so that all the chakras can also be opening and expanding, but also the fascia. And you can be on the phone with me to do this. So then the breathing, the diaphragm is helping to expand and release and process. And you're in a position where you're actually learning how to surrender in the process. So it's all about allowing, surrendering, being vulnerable,
Beautiful.
being intimate with yourself. Basically, it's a very feminine approach created by a woman.
Yeah.
But applicable to
woman's
men,
touch.
I'm
Well, yeah,
sure.
I mean, and it
Completely
seems-
applicable to men.
And
Men-
again, even just that kind of gender typing on it, I think, is more over.
It's
this
the
sort of
feminine
idea.
energy.
Well, it is too, but
It's a
it's
feminine
basically
energy
a lot of it comes down
based.
to stop fighting.
Well, I was
Yeah.
going to say,
Stop fighting
Surrender.
this is
yourself.
also
Stop
at
resisting
very
yourself.
much at the
Yeah.
root of most men's sexual problems.
Yeah.
And there's a word, both of us for years have loved correcting, because I think most people use the word incorrectly. The word psychosomatic, people think of it as like hypochondriacal.
Right.
Like it's not real, it's imagined. Nothing could be further from the truth. Psychosomatic is literally the mind-brain, the body-mind connection. Right. And our mind is part of our body. It's not like some vehicle carrying around this idea, right? People
And
think
our
like
subconscious
they're
is our
separate
body.
thing.
And I learned that.
sexuality,
Yeah.
sexuality is experienced as a psychosomatic experience through our senses, right? And our senses are nothing more than specialized
perception,
nerve
yeah.
cells that send signals to the most important sex organ between our ears, and then we experience sexuality.
But if I may also add to that, that what they do is they bring in information from the outside world. And I think where a lot of people's little t traumas come from, where a lot of the things to let go, like you just said, we take all this information, and whether we have an experience where somebody tells us we're no good, somebody gives us something that, you know, is shaming or physically harmful or psychologically harmful, we don't really need other people, you know, to have a lot of these negative interpretations that become these little t traumas
Or when
that
something-
pile up in people.
when something feels good and then you get a message, shame on you, you're supposed to feel bad about that.
That's right. That's right. And I think what we
all
see
wounded.
is, you know, I think people talk about trauma. Like, first of all, it's this big monolithic kind of thing. But I think a lot of what people are really being stuck by is this whole sort of collection, this big pile of all of these smaller things. You know, and I'm saying smaller not in a judgment, but, you know, it's my insecurities, my, you know, my lack of understanding, my feeling guilty, my
and
shame,
where do you go to
my
learn
interpretation.
how to be a great lover? This is something that a lot of people, I have clients that are 30 years married, and they want to learn how to make conscious lovemaking. And they finally admit, you know, I
there's a
think it could be
phrase.
better.
Absolutely.
I think we could have more
Phrase we need to-
fun, or 20 years. And where do you go learn how to be an amazing, conscious, loving, expansive, meeting the divine in your bedroom person? So
not many places, unfortunately. That's why people do kind of turn to looking at porn.
We need to talk more about this idea of conscious lovemaking and what that really means.
Yes.
Because most people, Betty said this on the show a couple months ago, our dear friend Betty Capros, people aren't making love to each other, they're getting off together.
Right.
Something's been lost along the way. People are so in their head. I was talking about this morning. Nobody questions the function of any body function unless something's broken. We don't think about our urinary function. We assume our body knows what to do, except when it comes to sex. Then the panic comes in. Then the head gets in the way. Then all these old messages, and somebody hits rewind and play on all these tapes, the shoulds, the shames, the oh my God, shame on you, don't touch that, you'll go blind.
Shouldn'ts, I'm not supposed to like this so much.
Right. And
it's a big part of
and
that.
the whole taboo with the anal area, you know, when I look at the body, I think of the science of pleasure. And yes, men, your anal area, you have a lot of pleasure nerves and get to know your prostate.
Yes.
If you can have a whole body orgasm without even having an erection, why not? Why not discover that aspect of yourself and deepen yourself in that way? And for the ladies, get to know your G-spot, your cervix, not just that cervix is where your baby comes out of, but that is a beautiful, rich, orgasmic territory to discover.
Well, I mean, don't we have the ability to be orgasmic literally from head to toe?
Yes, yes.
But
And I'm just mentioning these parts because most people...
Right? In our genitals, in our mouth, our lips, our tongue,
And
our
our hands,
anus,
and
our
our
fingertips.
Right.
All of the most erogenous zones. We were talking earlier about what erotic really means. There are sexual parts and there are erogenous parts. If someone can have an orgasm from their earlobe being
And just from
nuzzled,
breathing.
Right.
or just from breathing,
Yes.
this is erogenous anatomy.
Right.
And it's
But
heightening.
this is whole body.
Yeah. Well, heightening the experience of the pleasure of your body. So first we have to get through all the beliefs that my body is even remotely pleasurable, and then examine those beliefs and notice them. And so that's where this work, I feel that anybody working with the body, it behooves us, whether we're a massage therapist, a physical therapist, a doctor, to really look at the beliefs of our clients.
Absolutely.
Because that's literally creating a lot of the dis-ease that we're having.
Right. You said something important before that I think there's not a single medical professional that has really ever asked their patients what is their emotional connection to their genitals. How do they feel? I mean, how often do we, find ourselves reminding, particularly OBGYNs, there's people attached to those genitals. There are all these other processes
But
that
you
kind of
can't
go
see
along
the
with
emotions that are trapped in your tissues. So if I could literally have a sign that would show me shame on let's just say that I'm holding shame and judgment. And let's just say that when we do hold that, the word shows up on your skin.
Wow.
Everybody would be paying attention to their emotional.
And know how to get it removed.
Yes, and learn how to get it removed. But what happens is we walk around with suitcases of resentment. A whole elephant of resentment on our chest, or fear in our stomach, or shame in our vaginas, and no one can see it until it becomes something, which I'm not saying that's the only reason, but I mean, I've worked with women with fibroids and cysts in their ovaries, and there's always, always, always been, I can say always, 100% always, some type of resistance to embracing their full sexual experience.
I mean, it's part of the programming. I mean, again,
But then what I'm saying is it manifesting in the body.
Exactly.
And as Louise Hay, the Heal Your Body, it really is incredible how having fibroids, cysts, endometriosis, rarely do you have someone that is completely clear emotionally, that is really joyful
open.
and connected, that has something happen. Usually there's always been either trauma, some type of resentment, some type of shaming.
What's that book by that?
And the body's
that
just
big MFT Van
getting
Der
our
Wolk or something?
attention.
Your body keeps the score.
Yeah.
And your body doesn't lie.
And I think a lot of that stuff too, a visualization somebody gave me one time years ago, it's like when there's all of this repression and oppression in the body, all of this pressure, something has to give, so a lot of these things get pushed out. You know, and you know, in years I used to do experiential work. I very strongly believe that a lot of the issues, a lot of the problems that people are faced with and living with are kind of, I mean, they reflect, they're symbolic of a lot of the underlying driving issues with them.
And the unprocessed hurts.
Yeah.
And how a lot of us are choosing partners that are simply mirroring how we were brought up.
Well, that's
our
the thing.
parenting, how
That's the
our parents
thing.
treated us.
Because what makes us comfortable, especially when we have nothing intervening.
Right.
You know, people often, I think, misunderstand comfort. Comfort, it's not necessarily something that makes us feel good. Comfort is something that fills our needs.
Familiar.
And it's familiar. Comfort is usually based on the familiar. Exactly. So when people recreate a lot of these, it's that comfort. Do they feel good? No, but it's familiar.
It's
what
known,
they
yeah.
know. And there is a sense of comfort in that.
Control.
So to try to break people, and this, I think, even goes back to this deep-seated fear of pleasure that so many people have. Right? How many people, you know, if they say, "Oh, I'm afraid I might like that,"
Oh, yes.
and that becomes the
afraid to
basis
lose
of how
control.
they frame a pleasure. They're afraid to lose control. They're afraid it'll overtake them. They're afraid that it's just not right. It's another one of those sort of supposed to's, ought nots of that people get stuck in that mindset.
Well, remember that the French expression for orgasm, le petit mort, the little death.
A little death.
And that's a real fear for a lot of people. That,
So
can't lose control.
So before
Well,
we
it's a
completely
death of
run
the
out of
ego.
time,
It's a death of the
yeah.
ego.
Well,
That's that's
Which-
part 3.
Yeah,
right
exactly,
there.
exactly.
That
Which
Who
is
am I? Who
which
am
is
I
a
if I'm no
total
longer
surrender
there?
and letting
That
go,
we have to continue.
and allowing oneself to fall into that abyss.
Yeah,
Okay.
we're gonna run out
So
of minutes.
in our final minute and a half that we have,
Well, I highly recommend, if I can make a little tip for everyone,
please.
to just lay down in your bed and bring the soles of your feet together, your knees wide apart, and open up your body and just lean back into your mattress. So every day you can surrender into the support of your divine mattress and allow yourself to practice there in your bed. Into me see, simply feeling your breath, feeling your body, laying there, feeling supported. And you can always go to my website and download a free audio meditation that'll teach you ways to release and allow yourself to receive
Excellent. And real quick, that
yourself
website
completely.
is
www.michellealva, 2 L's and an E, ALVA, michellealva.com. Right?
Yeah, and
And
there's
you
a
can
free
get 'em.
gift for you there.
wonderful.
Oh, beautiful.
Thank you so much.
Thanks
Again,
for
Thank you,
joining us
everyone.
We're
again.
gonna have to keep
Thank you.
keep
Yes,
this going.
we'll keep
It
the
is-
conversation
like,
going.
And like with a lot of things sexual, it really isn't where we end up. It is about how we get there. So thank you for helping us continue our journey. Thank
And
you all
thanks
for
to
listening
everybody
and
for
watching.
listening. And Larry and I will
Thank-
be here next Monday and every Monday at 9 o'clock for Sex Talk with the Siegel Brothers.
Good night. Have a
Ciao.
great week.
You've been listening to Sex Talk with the Siegel Brothers. Join us every Monday night at 9 p.m. on WNN, 1470 AM and 95.3 FM. Or watch live streaming video at AMP2 TV Productions on Facebook, or look for the shows on YouTube. Thanks for tuning in, and we hope you'll join us again next week.
The opinions